I'm the curator of the Gaston County Museum of Art and History in Dallas, North Carolina. Very happy to be here. This is my second iteration of doing this, so if it seems a little practice, that's because I have done it before, but there is a part that I added special for you. So I hope you all enjoy. This is going to be a presentation about Gaston 250 and America 250's themes and tying it directly to Gaston County history. So hopefully you'll recognize a lot of the faces that you see on the screens and a lot of the history that we discuss as well. All right, so the three themes that we're going to be talking about are visions of freedom, a gathering of voices, and common ground. And first, I wanted to just ask anybody here, have you been to the Gaston County Museum before? I know a couple of you have. Okay, great. Those of you who have not, I hope I will convince you that you should come and see us at the museum. And those of you who have been to the museum again, I hope to convince you to come back because we have a new exhibit opening in July. All right. So, 250 years ago this July, over 50 men representing 13 colonies signed a bold declaration of independence from British rule. The act of this was treasonous, and the signers risked everything for an independent country. Not everyone agreed with them. Families and friends were often divided over the issue of independence, but these men had a vision for what they wanted to see for a more perfect union. And after successes and some failures, both of war and politics, economically and infrastructurally, the United States of America became a world-recognized independent country. In the past 250 years, the United States has seen some incredible successes that has made us a leader on the world stage. We explored and expanded west to the Pacific Ocean. We developed the lands, roads, communities across thousands of miles. We built cities and skyscrapers and a network of wagon roads that eventually became train tracks and then roads to have people and goods traverse hundreds and hundreds of miles. We developed industries that would impact the globe from ideas to goods, and resources such as gold and cotton, tobacco, steel, and more. We innovated things like electricity and flight. We produced musicians, artists, authors, athletes, chefs, and they impacted countries and people all over the world with their creativity and their passion. We were the neighbors to fellow countries and fought for democracy and freedom in arenas across the world, even becoming a leading voice for justice for all. Really, I could go on and on about just this country and how great we are and how proud we should all be of the country. But I think it's also extremely important to realize that with all the good things that we have to celebrate, there are also a lot of things that people may be more comfortable to forget. And it's instead that we need to understand our past and continue to create spaces of evolution for ourselves and for future generations. The themes of America's 250 nationwide celebrations capture the jubilation, but also the reflection needed for a true understanding of American history. The first is the visions of freedom. The American Revolution was an important maker on the continual journey towards true freedom for North Carolinians. This theme is a good place to identify political, military, or social revolutionary era leaders who took bold steps to stand up to British rule. Here we also highlight movements that pushed us closer to a better version of our state and our nation, such as civil rights, women's suffrage, and even scientific and industrial developments. All have shaped who and what we are as North Carolinians striving for the promises of 1776. The second is a gathering of voices. This commemoration cannot be told through a single voice and lived experience. The historic and modern day voices and stories of North Carolinians serve to inspire others to take innovative steps towards a more perfect union and to ensure that all voices are heard. Our revolutionary ancestors have much to tell us about their lives and experiences. Voices from our recent past can also inspire us to recognize that out of many, one voice can be heard, can make change, and can affect us all. For common ground, we must recognize that we are students, witnesses, and makers of history. Physical spaces hold shared stories of struggle, creation, and connection, and our spaces of reverence, such as battlefields, historic spaces, and the natural world, can echo happiness, violence, painful memories, evidence of struggle, rebirth, and even growth. All hold the narratives of collective and individual struggle, creativity, and relationships to one another. We must always strive for common ground and ways to make our state a better place. So, Where does Gaston County fit with these predetermined themes for the America 250? Well, using the themes of this 250th anniversary, I'm going to go over 3 examples of how Gaston County impacts the rest of the country, but also how our citizens mimic the rest of the country in all of its glorious diversity. It may surprise you, but our county was the location of a catalyst for change that affected nearly every American in this country. Prior to 1938, children worked alongside adults across the country in factories, mills, mines, farms, and more. They endured harsh conditions, heavy machinery, long hours, and little pay. In many parts of the country, families who struggled to put food on the table sent their children to work as young as 6 and sometimes 5 years old, depending on the job. Some children would become sick, injured, or even lose limbs in some of their work environments. And after the turn of the 20th century, the National Child Labor Committee was formed in Washington, D.C. They wanted to uncover child working conditions, so they hired a photographer named Lewis Hine to photograph children at work. He primarily spent his time in textile mills in the American South. And as we all know, in the early 1900s, textile mills were booming in Gaston County. We boasted nearly 50 textile mills by 1910, and eventually there would be almost 100 mills in the county. Lewis Hine spent approximately a year in Gaston County photographing children in textile mills and outside their homes. While many of the photographs that he did were posed, such as entire staffs of mills or families outside of their home posed together, the truly compelling photographs that captured the hearts of Americans and politicians were the candid shots of children working, like this one. You can see the focus required for the task that these children were doing. And even though some of them were teenagers, others looked much younger. After years of traveling and photographing conditions of textile mills and other industries, Lewis Hine shared his photographs with the world and unveiled the reality of hard labor. His photographs and the work of legislators in Washington, D.C. resulted in the Fair Labor Standard Acts of 1938. Some of the protections included there were restrictions on age of employment, a standard minimum wage, and overtime pay for working over 40 hours a week. And although many of us think this is very standard today, this would have been a very big change to employment and what labor looked like in America. And it all ties back right here to Gaston County. So each of us in this room, unless you are of Native American descent, are immigrants. We all traveled from somewhere else, probably Europe, I know my family did, to start a new life in a new land, in a new country. America was seen as a place of opportunity. So people scraped and saved until they could afford to traverse the Atlantic Ocean and arrive safely here in America. Some people stayed at the port they arrived at, but many of them traveled farther into America. From the founding families to the textile barons that transformed this county, and from the farmers who tilled the land and the business owners that made this county home, immigrants transformed Gaston County, and their legacy continues to present day. One such immigrant story is of Carmine Coletta. Does this ring any bells to anyone in the audience here?
Tony.
Yes, absolutely, Tony. So if it doesn't ring any bells, I'll give you, in a few minutes, you will definitely recognize who I'm talking about. In 1909, this gentleman, Carmine Coletta, immigrated to the United States and settled in Gastonia. A few years later, he started an ice cream business selling frozen treats from a push cart in a horse-drawn wagon. Carmine had his fourth and final child, Tony, while he lived in Gastonia. Tony grew up and had a family of his own, with 2 sons, Louis and Robert, pictured here with him. He was called Bob for short. Carmine also had a daughter, Mary, who married an Italian immigrant named Tony Janetta, so there were 2 Tonys. They also opened an ice cream store and sold savory delights. In fact, they opened this store that we all recognize today. If you don't know them now, I'm sure now you are very familiar with where we're going. These 2 businesses are today known as Tony's Ice Cream. The building has largely been unchanged since the 1940s, and it's a place known today with nostalgia and shared memory for countless people across Gaston County. Plus, they serve really good ice cream. We would never have had Tony's Ice Cream without Carmen Coletta and his now 4 generations of family who owned and operated the business. I love sharing this story because it's a reminder that everyone comes from somewhere and everyone has a valuable place in our shared society. Okay, so our third example of Gaston County history tied to these themes is about the civil rights movement. And it would take me a really long time to go over everything there is to know about the civil rights movement, not only in our county but in our state. So I'm going to go with a very small part of it, and that is about the desegregation of our public schools. You can learn more about all this subject matter at our new exhibit, which is opening on July 18th, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But for now, I'm going to start with 2 court rulings that led us to the desegregation of the schools. And that is first Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, which was later overruled by Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. Plessy versus Ferguson, of course, established the very famous phrase, separate but equal, and declared that that was lawful, which was set into, and then of course that set into motion some de facto and de jure civil rights Jim Crow laws. There were 4 segregated high schools in Gaston County: Lincoln Academy, Highland High School, Reed High School, and John Chavis High School. All of them thrived as very functional, very successful schools. But despite separate but equal, these schools helped develop countless students, and they served students well beyond Gaston County. Lincoln Academy, for instance, served students as far away as New York because it was a boarding school. So students came from very far away to be in our county and be educated here. Integration was a vital part of opportunity and growth. And in 1954, the case of Brown versus Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas, declared that separate was inherently unequal, and integration began in schools across the country. Here in Gaston County, it took a couple of years to attempt to start integration, and in fact, it wasn't until 1963 that the first African American students integrated in all-white high school. In preparation for the 1963-1964 academic year, 2 schools were selected to allow voluntary integration with 2 students per school. Robert Pyatt II and his sister Barbara Pyatt attended Hutter Huss High School, and Diane Walker and her sister Laura Walker attended Ashley High School. You can see Diane and Laura seated and studying in this newspaper article here. They're the 2 with the lovely hair right there, and I think Laura has really cool glasses on. All right. It took the signing of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 to codify integration into federal law. Just a year later, pamphlets went out to schools and other institutions in preparation of integration. So in the 1966 and 1967 school year, schools were integrated in Gaston County and across the nation. Following integration, there was still much work that needed to be done, and it took several years to completely integrate staff and teachers in addition to their students. As I mentioned earlier, there is much more to learn about this really interesting topic, and I'm inviting you all to come on July 18th to see the opening of this exhibit. It'll be open till the end of December of 2027, so you have plenty of time to see it, but I do encourage you to come out on Saturday the 18th to check it out. Let's see, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that this sketch that you see here is from John T. Biggers. This is one piece that was conserved. We sent everything up to Philadelphia to be conserved, and this is one of the pieces that have been conserved, and there will be 4 John Biggers pieces on display when this exhibit goes live. So please come and check that out. I know that's been a long overdue. Okay. Before I end my talk and let you guys then ask any questions that you may have, I wanted to also invite you to see a couple other exhibits that are at the museum. One is Woven with a Purpose, and it is about innovative basketry for generations to come. There's also our textile exhibit, we have a carriage house, and we also have a commemorative 250 exhibit on display. And starting on July 3rd, we will have an interactive space open for children, and it is called Hoffman Farm to Friends, and it is an interactive play experience where children will learn how to take food from farm all the way to table, just as they would have done in the historic Hoffman Hotel. All right, so that concludes my talk. And I appreciate any questions that you may have. I'm happy to go back and show pictures a little bit more closely if you have any questions.
Allison, do you still have the Tony ice cream exhibit?
It just closed.
It just closed.
Yeah, so it just closed. That exhibit closed in May, and the next exhibit that's going on display is the Many Unheard Voices. That one took its place.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was very good.
Thank you very much. That was a fun one. Usually when exhibits come down, I'm ready for them to come down, but Tony's was different. It was hard to see that one go. Yeah.